The Civil War is here. A quote from MSNBC's Tiffany Cross. The full context is, she said, some people would say that a civil war is coming. I would say that a civil war is here. In response to Joe Biden's speech last night, Democrat media activists are saying that this was a pre-war speech akin to what was said before the first Civil War and before World War II. As Joe Biden came out and denounced all of Trump's supporters as a threat to this country, as the White House has done so several times, people on Twitter on the left are gleefully cheering for what is possibly one of the darkest, most dangerous and divisive speeches that we've ever heard come from a president. Now, polling has been coming out for a long time, showing that many in America believe that a civil war is coming. But many are actually suggesting, and on the right, that last night was Joe Biden's declaration of civil war. Yeah, I think so. There's a video posted by a journalist from, I think he's from Huffington Post, showing police in the Capitol on January 6th yelling that they're not going to lose the Capitol today. And then people are banging on the door and there's violence. I think in 50 years, when they're writing about the Second Civil War, or whatever it is you want to call this, they're going to say that it actually started in 2020 or maybe even 2016. They're going to say maybe, Donald Trump's election was the precursor and 2020 was the start. They may even say January 6th. I mean, if you look at it from a historical perspective, if I were to tell you there's a civil war and then one of the early events in that civil war was a group of people trying to storm into the Capitol and stop the electoral vote count, you'd say, yeah, that sounds like that's when it started, right? Now, whatever your opinion is on January 6th, I'm not saying it's definitive. What I am saying is history is written by the winners. And in the future, they're going to write about this moment in whatever way the winners decide it should be written as. If Trump supporters end up winning the culture war and the civil war, they'll write that they were patriots. They'll write that they were unjustly prosecuted and perhaps a riot. And if the left wins, they'll write that Donald Trump staged a coup and an insurrection. It doesn't matter what your political ideology is. Set that one aside. What matters is that both sides now are recognizing there is no path forward. There isn't one. I've long believed that building culture would be the way to reunite this country. But you see, what's happening is the left is losing the culture war. They are. It's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think so. They claim that when their shows suck, it's a review bomb. They claim that the right is just a fringe faction, but Donald Trump is overperforming in the polls. And there's 74 million people who voted for him in 2020. No one really supported Joe Biden to such a degree. They just voted against Trump. So Trump supporters are growing. And we'll see what happens now that Donald Trump's got a 92% endorsement success rate. I would believe that Donald Trump and the culture war right is winning. And for that reason, they will become violent and dangerous. And Joe Biden's speech last night is being heralded as a pre-war speech. I mean, they're outright saying it was a declaration of war. They're outright saying that civil war is coming. They're outright saying that this is just like right before the Civil War began. The FBI is going after Trump. They're potentially targeting the lawyers of the former president. They've arrested the lawyer for the Oath Keepers. I think it's fair to see that we've not entered the hot conflict phase of a civil war, but law enforcement is using corrupt powers they technically don't have, to target lawyers and people who oppose them. So it doesn't matter your political ideology. What matters is that people are willing to do whatever they want for power. It's begun. I don't know exactly how it will play out or where we will go, but I think it's important to note, whether you agree or disagree, mainstream, high-profile corporate press says the Civil War is here. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member if you'd like to support our work. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive segments on the Timcast IRL podcast, uncensored, Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m., as well as our other shows like Cast Castle and Tales from the Inverted World. Also, check out Pop Culture Crisis. But don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's get into the latest updates from Joe Biden's speech from Fox News. MSNBC's Eugene Robinson describes Biden's speech as urgent wartime address, as network keeps evoking civil war. They say, Washington Post columnist and MSNBC analyst Eugene Robinson described President Biden's polarizing Thursday speech in Philadelphia as an urgent wartime address, continuing MSNBC's recent fascination with a possible civil war. Shut up, Fox News, you pathetic weirdos. MSNBC is not wrong. You're free to hate them for their politics, but this is the stupidest writing ever. Their fascination with civil war. It has been talked about across the board from everyone, left to right. And while the left and the right have their people who believe it may not happen, what Fox News is doing here is annoyingly stupid and just playing this MSNBC is so dumb. You're insane. This is the problem. MSNBC said it, so it must be wrong. Shut up. Robinson, during a Friday appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe, echoed Biden's words when he noted that the United States is currently in a battle to preserve its democracy. He noted that he was unsure as to what motive or delusion so-called MAGA Republicans have that compels them to head down their authoritarian path. Oh, their authoritarian path. Yeah, okay. Tell me more about how Kamala Harris helped bail out rioters and these riots resulted in murder and death. He framed this as an emergency, as something that we as a nation need to bond together to stop and to reverse and to return to our democratic principles and our democratic practices. And to me, it was an urgent wartime address. The Post columnist has made a number of eyebrow-raising remarks in recent memory. A July 4th column following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, Robinson compared abortion seekers to slaves attempting to flee for free states. Yes. And while I don't completely agree with the politics behind this, the political ideology, I think he's still right. We are on opposing ends of the spectrum. We interviewed Stephen Marsh. He is more establishment left. He's Canadian, but he wrote a book called The Next Civil War. We agree that's where we're going. He's wrong about his facts. I mean, it's just, seriously. He puts out a video where, look, Stephen Marsh is right about a lot of what he's seeing, but he's heavily biased in favor of the authoritarianism and the establishment. And the way he described it was actually pretty apt. He said, it is a multicultural democracy and a constitutional republic in the same space, and they both can't survive. Fair point. I believe in a constitutional republic. He believes in a multicultural democracy. Well, he's Canadian, so. It feels like civil war is here, Cross said. Yeah, well, she said, I would say a civil war is here. That's a bit more definitive. Fox is trash. The host made a similar claim last month when she guest hosted for MSNBC's The Readout. People keep saying a civil war is coming. I would say a civil war is here, she said. We have another article. MSNBC historian compares Biden's speech to Lincoln, FDR before Civil War and World War II. They are effectively saying what Joe Biden did was declare war. You don't come out and say, just like Abraham Lincoln in 1860. That was a pre-war declaration. Well, I think Abraham Lincoln was campaigning in 1860. He became president in 1861. MSNBC historian Michael Beschloss explained Thursday that President Biden's speech in Philadelphia was inspired by presidential speeches before two of America's biggest wars. 1860, this country was in big jeopardy. It was splitting apart, a house divided, slavery or non-slavery. And Lincoln cast the election of 1860 by saying the House can't stand, half slave free, we've got to choose. He then moved on to talk about President Franklin D. Roosevelt. In 1940, when Franklin Roosevelt was running for a third term, just as you mentioned, Roosevelt didn't say the paramount issue this year is the minimum wage, although that was pretty important, or whether Texans get an oil depletion allowance or something like that, like this. He said, look, these are all important, but what is really at stake at this moment is whether our children are going to get to live in an American democracy, especially with Hitler and the fascists looming in Europe and marching. Yeah. And both of those speeches were precursors to major war. Beschloss then claimed that he and fellow historians explained to Biden in the meeting, this is like 1860, this is like 1940. You have to talk about the large issue in the room. And just as Lincoln gave the House divided speech, just as Roosevelt gave a speech on the State of the Union about the four freedoms, as you well know, 1941. Here is the time when President Biden has chosen. He said he did not help Biden write the speech himself, but credited his team for convincing Biden that this is an historic moment. What you heard, I think, comes of that. Here's a clip from Karine Jean-Pierre, Robbie Starbuck tweets. Let me actually, you know what? I want to make sure I can give you the full context. I'm going to play some of this audio for you.
There
Actually,
is
I don't
no
think
let's
the audio
deal
is
with the
actually
rhetoric.
playing.
At this point, I do think we have to have serious conversations around preparing for actual violence. People keep saying a civil war is coming. I would say a civil war is here. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic. We can look at what has happened just in the past week alone. Since all this has happened, we've had 2 people try to declare war with FBI field offices.
I think it's a fair point. Doesn't matter your politics. But let's play this clip from Karine Jean-Pierre.
And again, we see majority of Americans who disagree. And so when you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
No, it isn't. That's not what extreme means. 49% is not extreme. It's actually average. This is one of the worst press secretaries I've ever seen. She's awful. But I'd like to point out that more people hate Joe Biden, I should say disapprove of Joe Biden, than approve of him. So to make that claim is patently absurd. You are thereby calling yourselves extreme. Insane. Robbie says democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what they should eat for lunch. We aren't a democracy. Well, here's more sentiment. Joe Biden said Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are a threat to the very soul of this country. No, that's you. You decrepit, spineless old pervert. You know, I've got my issue with the die-hard MAGA Trump supporters. They're worthy of criticism, same as anybody else. But you are a despotic nightmare of a man. You are both simultaneously authoritarian and deluded, incapable. But what you represent is the corporate establishment, the uniparty corruption. And it's funny to see Vaush suckling the teat of the establishment, because I'll say this to you, Vaush. You are not old enough to understand. And you said it to me when you came on the show. You didn't know anything about Joe Biden. Well, when Obama killed the first child and first American citizen, those of us who lived through it said, hey, maybe these are bad people. Now, Donald Trump's bad in a lot of ways, too. Certainly think so. But I will take what you think is the crumbling of the establishment over the establishment. I remember the lies of the Obama administration and the extrajudicial assassinations of American citizens. And I see Vaush cheering for it. And when I asked him about it, he says, I was too young. I don't know. And therein lies the problem. Well, I can't necessarily blame him. For those unfamiliar, he's a prominent leftist commentator. I can't necessarily blame him for being too young to remember. But it's fascinating. This is how this country operates. Young people with no experience come in and then vote based on the whims of social movements. As for me, I said yes to Obama in 2008 and no to him in 2012 because he's a psychotic murderer who killed American citizens without charge or trial, namely Anwar al-Awlaki and Abdurrahman al-Awlaki. Now, you can say everything you want about Anwar al-Awlaki, who was a jihadist who hated America. He was still an American citizen, and American citizens must be charged and face trial. Instead, he blew him up. But let's talk about Abdurrahman, a 16-year-old American citizen who was at a civilian cafe in Yemen, and they blew him up. I believe his statement to terrorists, we will kill your children. Psychotic, fascistic despotism from a scumbag like Barack Obama and his corrupt VP, Joe Biden. And so it's fascinating to watch people who aren't smart enough to go back and watch and read about this cheer it on. Okay, dude. I'm sorry, man. I can respect any disagreement on policy positions. I think, Vaush is a well-read individual when perhaps it comes to that. But to come out and cheer for this, what did Donald Trump do? End the wars? No new wars? Man. Lawrence Tribe tweets, this moment is akin to 1860 or 1940. The 2 points in our past when we faced existential threats from anti-democratic forces of domination and subordination. As at those times, those who believe we shall overcome will prevail if we keep the faith and work our hearts out. These people are just so deeply insane and evil. Hey, F. Joe Biden is trending. How about that? A second civil war in the U.S. 43% of Americans think it's likely in the next 10 years. I don't care for this poll because I've already seen like 50 of them all saying the exact same thing to varying degrees, that a civil war is coming. And you know what? If it happens and they write about it, you know what I tell people? We can't see the forest for the trees. You're in the forest. You don't realize you are. So you look around and you say, I just see a bunch of trees. And someone's trying to tell you the big picture. You're in the forest, brother. And when you come out and say you're in a civil war, friend, you best start believing in civil war stories. You're in one. They say, no, we're not. That's so absurd. Civil war. What are you talking about? Yeah. When history looks back and takes account of everything that happened, they're going to be like, yep, civil war. It's fascinating to me that I could say these things. I love how every week it gets worse, too. I like the line. If I went back in time in 2015 and told you that in 7 years' time, Donald Trump would be out as president, 1,000+ people will have tried to break into the Capitol, with several hundred actually getting in. Not everybody violent, though. The FBI would be going to people's homes and arresting them and putting them in solitary confinement, some for almost 2 years. That Donald Trump would claim the election was stolen. That people would be marching in the streets fighting each other. That the FBI would raid the home of the former president. That people would be calling for the indictment and impeachment, that the president would be impeached twice. If I were to tell you that the president of the United States would get up and say half of this country is a threat to our democracy. If I were to tell you that a man with a Black Lives Matter tattoo would have his gun ready in hand, see a Trump supporter and put 2 in his chest on a Portland street, who would have believed any of it? And I know they wouldn't have, because I was saying this in 2017 and 18, and people were saying to me it was impossible. The security state won't allow it. Now, half the country thinks it's coming. Poll after poll shows around half the country says civil war is coming. Now everyone seems to think so. Who would have thought Joe Biden would give a speech so psychotic, so deranged, and so dangerous? Yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. Eric Weinstein. He says, I just don't see any path back, at least tonight. I was not looking forward to this speech, and it was bad. We seem determined to continue to unravel this amazing country. Gonna go listen to some live blues where no one cares about race. Thankfully, there's a 2-drink minimum. It's fascinating. I said this very thing 4 years ago. Maybe I was lucky, you know? You get a bunch of monkeys in a room and eventually you give a bunch of monkeys typewriters and eventually one of them will write Shakespeare, right? A broken clock is right twice a day. Eric Weinstein saying, I don't see a path back. I said this years ago. And I'm not trying to take credit or anything or act like I'm more perceptive or whatever. It's that I think people aren't paying attention. Shout out to Joe Rogan again. I know I've brought it up a million times. He said, Tim Pool came on the show a few years ago. He said this like a week or two ago and said there was going to be, he thinks we're headed towards a civil war. And I thought, he's crazy. You know, calm down, man. Now I think he might be right. You know, it's funny. When Joe Rogan said that, he had already recorded that episode. And that morning, a man tried breaking into an FBI field office in Ohio, thinking that he could breach bulletproof glass. He could not. And then he was killed. Joe said that before even knowing about that story. Joe said that, and then only a few weeks later, we get the Joe Biden story, the Joe Biden speech, where he condemns half the country. Eric Weinstein presents it as such. He says, one overarching reaction, the speech was 1/3 of a speech. There are 3 groups threatening U.S. democracy. I don't like that phrase, democracy. It's ridiculous. No one can give the needed speech until they out all 3 groups. Eric is wrong. He says there's the extractocrats, which is the establishment, Democrats and GOP. The armed wing of each faction, which is the MAGAstan and Wokistan. And then the culture war is the core of Wokistan and MAGAstan. He's wrong. I mean, it's close. I don't think Eric pays enough attention. He's a very smart man, but I don't think he knows enough about what's happening to accurately see the forest or, for the trees. Or, I mean, you don't see the forest for the trees. What I mean to say is MAGA stan is wrong. I am not MAGA. Maybe a little bit. It's nuanced. I think MAGA is better than anything else because they at least believe in free speech, American values, things that made our families safe and made our lives better, lifted people out of poverty. Wokeistan, the woke far left. Not every single person on the left is woke. The Democrats, many of them don't like woke, but they still align with it. And MAGAstan are not armed extremists. It's insane. Yes, they are Proud Boys. They go out and they fight Antifa. But they're not walking around lining up buildings with guns. Sometimes, but rarely. Wokeistan also has Antifa. So I get the point he's trying to make. But Wokeistan and MAGAstan need to just be culture war left, culture war right. And of course, they're more politically active than the extractocrats, the Democrats, and the GOP. But the right are cowards. I'm sorry, that's the reality. I'm not saying every single person on the right, but that is, for the most part, the reality. I don't know if I have the post pulled up. I don't think so. But there was a letter Jesse Kelly published. I think it was Jesse Kelly. Someone said that they're in military academy. And then every day everyone just talks about how evil Trump is and white privilege and all that stuff. And he says, I won't say anything because I'm a coward. That's what he said. The left aren't cowardly, but they are stupid. On average, they're ignorant of what's going on, but they're not cowardly. Taco Bell worker was wearing a Black Lives Matter mask. And they told him, take it off or you'll be fired. And he said, no, I won't take it off. And they said, then you'll be fired. And he says, then fire me. So they did. He made a video. He got his job back. Taco Bell said, we're so sorry you can wear your mask. Trump supporters, what do? I better not say anything because then I'll lose my job. Not all of them, obviously, but too many of them. Too many of the ones that have influence and power that have talked to me about how they agree. And there's the meme. They whisper, I completely agree with you, as they set the fire to torch the woman. That's the meme. In the FBI, split factions. But too many agents won't speak up because they're scared. Look, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's true. Now, I know a lot of you listening aren't that. I'm not talking to you, but I think y'all recognize that there are a lot of people who just won't speak up. Some people say it's just too hard. I'll lose my job. Okay, that's true. I feel for you, man. I mean it sincerely. I don't. It's scary, right? Okay. You will lose your job if you speak up, probably. If you don't speak up, you'll lose your family. You'll lose your job, too. Do you think that when these psychopaths win, you're safe? No, you'll lose your job. These people seem to think that you've got this row of houses with death going to each door and knocking and then ejecting people. But if you keep your head down, he'll pass right over your house. Well, I put a rainbow flag above my door so that judgment would pass over me. Not going to happen. People try it. You see these photos out of Germany. All the windows are smashed up. Save one. It's got an Antifa sign in the window. Go to Berkeley. The businesses all have leftist ideology in the windows. And I was at a bar and I asked the bartender because I had an anti-Trump thing. And I was like, you guys really hate Donald Trump, huh? And the lady was like, no, I don't know. And then I was like, then why do you have a sign calling him a pig? And they were like, so they don't smash our windows? And I went, wow. Lady told me how her friend of hers, I think she got physically attacked and seriously injured by a mob of psychopathic Antifa types. Here we are, my friends. The escalation is upon us. Okay, so I do have the Jesse Kelly thing. Let me show you. He says, I thought I should add some perspective to last night. F-15 threats and then that speech, but I still see so much the military would never cope out there. I get emails like this all the time. You do not know what's happening to your military. If Biden told them to go, they'd go. Yes. The right may be winning the culture war, but if the left becomes desperate and they're already deranged and decides to use violence, I think they stand a good chance of winning. It's funny. People on the right are like, but we have all the guns. No, you don't. The National Guard has the guns. They have select fire rifles. You have AR-15s. I mean, your AR-15 ain't bad, 5.56, but you don't have the capabilities of the military. And then people think, we're not going to fight with the military. What do you think's going to happen when Joe Biden arrests Donald Trump and then targets you. Do you think they won't come after you? You know, when I was younger, I didn't believe this. I remember, you know, I would hear stuff from like Alex Jones. I'd see stuff online and they'd say the military will come for you. And I'd be like, no, they won't. That's so dumb. Like a guy in the military is going to be like, they're all just attack an American citizen. I was like, get out of here. I was like, I don't believe it. I like the military. And then I actually met people in the military and they told me, oh, yeah. I said, if you were ordered to, you know, fire on a group of American citizens, would you do it? And they went, yeah. And I was like, without question, they're like, yeah, why? Yeah, I don't. And this is what they said to me. I don't know why I'm being told to do it. I trust my chain of command. If there's a threat and they say, stop them now, we do it. Yes. But I mean, think about it reasonably. I'm not trying to condemn the armed forces in its entirety, even though they are going woke. If you are in a combat unit and you see someone coming towards you, and then you've got a commanding officer who says, take them out, move now. Are you going to be like, why, commanding officer? I don't know. Maybe this guy's all right. And then, kaboom. Shoots at you, blows up, whatever happens. No, you have training. You follow your orders when you're in combat situations. I just watched a video of cops opening a guy's door. He sits up in his bed and they shoot him right away. And they said, we were scared. And you think that if they mobilize the National Guard, they wouldn't shoot you? Come on, dude. Here's the letter. Dr. Jesse, best doctor behind Fauci and Biden. I am a junior leader in the military. I'm currently in an academic setting. I go to class and every day we talk about how white people suck, how America is evil, and how Trump needs to go to prison. It isn't the instructors, not the curriculum. That stuff is stuck in about 2010 or 1985, depending on the slideshow. I believe the instructors are right-wingers. It's the students. The students talk about this. There's only one open conservative, and he gets mercilessly mocked by the lefties. He goes on to say, I worry about our future. I worry about my future, my family's future. Every day I wonder whether or not I should get out and work a normal job. I'm afraid either way, and a coward. Not really looking for advice. Stay safe out there, Miles. Miles, you are a coward. I'm sorry. I don't say that to be mean. I don't say that as an insult. I say that to acknowledge you are correct. You are staring as evil grows, and all that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And as you do nothing, I hope you accept that. That I hope in the future these people look back and say, I was a coward. Man, even Timothy Chalamet, I don't know who he is, but he says, societal collapse is in the air due to social media. Agreed. Mark Ruffalo in an interview said, with the time we're living in and heading towards, the future feels more precarious than any other time. So I don't know. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I hope I'm still around to do it. That is, play the Hulk. Even these actors don't know if it's going to happen. Joe Biden is effectively declaring war. I just think all of you need to go out and vote. I know, I really do mean it. I think violence is wrong. Violence is bad. And the best example is this. On 5/29/2020, the left insurrected at the White House. And the police came out and crushed the riot. So who was the bad guy? The police. The media came out and condemned the police. On January 6th, the police stood around. Not all of them. A lot of them were fighting. But a lot of them were standing around. Some even opened the doors. And then the Trump supporters were the ones who got in. So who are the bad guys? The Trump supporters. Violence makes you the bad guy in our current state of fifth generational warfare. They can justify anything and they can take action against you. Right now, the fear is that Biden's speech is meant to goad right-wingers into acts of violence, or at least, should it be a false flag or otherwise, make people believe that Trump supporters actually are going to go out and engage in extreme violence because they're the true threat. Yeah. Well, Biden already tried walking it back a little bit. I don't consider any Trump supporter a threat to the country. No, just MAGA Republicans? Yeah, nice attempt at walking things back. We have this tweet here. Sean Agnew says the internals on last night must be brutal. Yeah, I think so. I think the photo showing Joe Biden screaming, fists raised with a red background and a military behind him freaked them out. And they went, we went too far on that one. I think you might see a bunch of independents being like, oh, please, no, stop this. The Democrats hurt themselves, seriously hurt themselves. Feeding into the delusions and the Trump derangement syndrome. For what? Michael Knoll says the purpose of Putin's speech on 2/21 was to justify his invasion of Ukraine, which began 3 days later. The purpose of Biden's speech last night was to justify the arrest of his predecessor and top rival, which after the Mar-a-Lago raid could happen any day and seems more likely than not. I certainly agree. The National Review says why yesterday's DOJ filing suggests a Trump indictment is coming. Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Darren Beatty says from Biden's speech, it's obvious that they will indict Trump. A big goal of theirs is to incite violence in Trump's name. Don't take the bait. I responded. The plan was to prop up MAGA Republicans in the primary so they could demonize them and win the general. They spent a lot of money pushing the ideas of what they called MAGA Republicans, hoping that Trump-supported and Trump-endorsed candidates would win. Surprise, surprise, Trump endorsements are through the roof, 92% success rate. Now, they need to make sure MAGA is evil. So here's what I predict. A couple things could happen. One, they'll indict Trump because a lot of people today believe the nonsense of if Trump didn't do anything wrong, he wouldn't have been arrested. Sure, you're innocent until proven guilty, but this will work on people. The next, whether it's a deranged Trump supporter or a false flag, whatever you want to call it, I think it's very likely that we will see a Trump supporter, right-winger engage in some kind of serious violence. And then, right before the midterms, they will say, you see what they're doing? We need to stop them. Trump's in jail, and his supporters just did this thing. The Trump supporters will claim it's a false flag. The left will claim it's legitimate. Doesn't matter if it is or isn't. I think something like that is on the horizon. That's why Darren Beatty is saying don't take the bait. Well, depends on what you think. I think people are insane. I think there are stupid people, and I think they will take the bait. Donald Trump recently said, if he gets elected, he's considering pardons for everybody. January 6th. I mean, honestly, I think Trump should just pardon like almost everybody. Marijuana offense at the federal level, pardon them all. Seriously, Trump, if Trump came out and said, if I am elected in 2024 for 2025, I am going to pardon everybody. It's not actually a Trump impersonation. I'm actually doing an impersonation of Seamus doing a Trump impersonation. That's how I actually do it. But if Donald Trump came out and said that, I mean, I think he'd win tremendously. And I think he should. What they're saying now is this proves Trump has to be stopped because he's trying to pardon people who attempted to overthrow the country. Oh, yeah, a few hundred people standing in a building. That'll do it. How weak do you think this country is? Come on. But that is where I think we're headed. That's my prediction. MSNBC saying civil war is here. Joe Biden effectively giving a pre-war speech, so they say. These are declarations. And if you can't see the forest for the trees, I get it. But step back and think about where you are and don't be a frog in a boiling pot. I mean, look at what's going on. Aaron Danielson shot twice in the chest, killed. Donald Trump calling for an election do-over. 48 states involved in a lawsuit over unconstitutional election practices in 2020. And the Supreme Court rejected hearing it on the merits. Just saying no. I mean, these things are unprecedented. The FBI raiding a former president's home. Take a look around and see where you are, man. I'll tell you what I've been talking about. Property in other countries. I'm not joking. I don't care if people think I'm stupid or crazy or otherwise. You can think whatever you want about me. I went on Jack Dorsey's show. I went on Joe Rogan's show with Jack Dorsey. And at the end, I said, if they keep doing this, it's going to drive us towards civil war. And they did keep doing it. And they're still doing it. The New York Post. White House and big tech colluded to censor misinformation. Apparently, every week they were having meetings about how to censor people. Insane. This is where things are going. So I said, if they keep doing it, and where did we end up? From that point, 2019, look at all that's happened. And I had people saying, so where's the Civil War, Tim? And I went, on January 6th, several hundred Trump supporters were fighting with cops. And they went, oh. Yeah, the lefties, they laughed at the idea. Now they're saying January 6th, oh no. What did I say? You thought I was wrong? Well, I was right. They don't want to admit it. So I mentioned building a van, a bug-out van. Now I'm thinking, there are times throughout history when we've heard people would flee their countries when things got bad. And I mean bad in terms of like mass executions, okay? For the time being, I don't think that if I'm not actually, I'm looking at property in other countries. I mean, I'm actually going to do it. But I think it's something to start thinking about. Start thinking about where your family is in other countries to get away if you have to, but not flee before we've had a chance to stop this. Because I will make one thing abundantly clear. The reason he gave this speech is because he's scared and they're losing. So now is the time to win. In a couple months, we will vote in the midterms. And the Republicans will get in, and just enough of them will try to hold them to account. And if they can do a good enough job and Trump wins in 2024 or DeSantis, maybe we will actually put an end to this through a procedural process, an electoral process. And that is the ideal. But I will tell you, if Trump supporters get violent, they will lose in 2 seconds. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.